Talking Back the Night, let's catch up with Talking Back the Night regular Nathan Bray to take a look at some stories that the mainstream media probably aren't reporting on in Australia at the moment. G'day, Nathan.
G'day, Christian. Hello, everybody.
Immigration detention centre workers facing imprisonment for whistleblowing.
That's right. The Border Force Act. It could see some government contracted workers at onshore and, of course, the offshore detention facilities risk up to 2 years in jail if they speak about what they see there. It's pretty scary stuff. So barrister and spokesman for the Australian Lawyers Alliance, Greg Barnes, he said the act effectively had a chilling effect. So what it does is turn the Department of Immigration into a secret security organisation with police powers. So it's kind of like Saddam Hussein's henchmen up there, or literally like the Stasi. So it's pretty scary. What he's saying is, if, for example, a psychologist is working in a detention centre and that psychologist comes back from the detention centre, say writes an article for the ABC or goes on Q&A, okay, and says something the government doesn't like, okay, they can be therefore put in jail for 2 years, which, I don't know about you, it sounds like very, very scary stuff. And they should be able to come to the taxpayers who pay for it, right? It's our money, and we should be able to know what our money is going on and being spent and any crimes that are being committed. But remember, Christian, these detention centres are run by large British corporations like Serco, and they make big dollars out of people suffering, and they cannot get into trouble, as no doubt they pay the politicians to pass legislation like this and, of course, use lobbyists.
But how can legislation pass like this? The opposition would no doubt be in opposition to it, as you would expect, but especially on an issue such as this, the Greens and the crossbenchers, I'm surprised that legislation like this or this act would pass both houses of Parliament.
That's right. Well, Chris, think of it about it this way. You would be surprised, for example, that Tony Abbott would be able to stop boats. Okay, but he makes a bribe to a people smuggler, okay, and probably makes a bribe to the two guys in control. What the lobbyists are doing here is they are bribing or giving donations to both sides of government, Christian. They're making sure everybody gets paid.
That's a big call.
But that's a fact. We know that for a fact now.
Well, I don't know that for a fact. That both sides of Parliament are being bribed here.
Well, they're given political donations. They have lobbyists who are paid to tell them what's right and what's wrong. That's the state of our government. The Greens are the only people who stood up against this. So 1 minute we're saying it's okay. That's the type of politicians we have. They're quite comfortable giving bribes, Christian. Why? Because that's the job they do. They get given bribes. So someone who can be bribed, it's very easy for them to go and give a bribe. Wouldn't you agree? I've seen the figures. You can go and look them up. You can see the donations made by mining companies, pharmaceutical companies. They're paying both sides of our government. And because we pay with paper, because we vote with paper, as I've mentioned before, what's worth more to you as a politician to get which job done? The one where you get a large fee, or the one where it's just a bunch of people rattling on?
Nathan, we know that the situation in Greece is pretty dire, but over the last week it's becoming worse and more desperate. What's the situation there at the moment?
Well, Greece is a savage situation. It's right at the brink at the moment. All the banks are shut, okay, through till the end of this week.
Here,
where they're having
no money.
Correct. The ATMs are supposed to be refilled, but people have been lining up since 2 o'clock in the morning when the referendum was announced, which comes on Sunday, okay, and all of those are empty. Those Australians who are travelling there better take euro in cash.
Yeah.
Okay.
No drachma here.
There's no drachma here, but there is good news, Christian.
Yeah.
This is what I like to talk about, these stories that are coming out of it, which are positive. So there is actually a large number of clinics and food places, etc. I'll get to in a moment, okay, where people are doing it for free and making sure everybody's looked after. Because let's face it, few in Greece, even say 5 years ago, would have imagined that their recession and austerity ravaged country as it is now, which is 1.3 million people are out of the workforce there. They're without a job. All of them without benefits, or the majority of them, and wages. Imagine your wage was down by 38% tomorrow. And pensioners, they don't get paid much as it is, and they've been reduced 45%. So this is a population that has been unable to feed itself for some time now and living well below the poverty line. So what these free clinics have done in turn, okay, is they've allowed the political movement of well over about 400 citizen-run groups. So So they're called sort of food solidarity centres, social kitchen cooperatives, etc. And they don't have any middlemen. So they can distribute what is needed for the people over large networks with fresh produce, legal aid hub, education classes, all the stuff we used to have in Australia, right? When you think about it, that free education, all these things are the things that the people are starting to have a different view of the way politics should be run. It should be run from the bottom up. That's because we're supposed to be voting for a government for the people, rather than what we see now, a perfect example as we see over there in these detention centres, where the people at the top, the corporations, are being protected, okay, and everybody else down the bottom isn't allowed to hold anything. Yeah. It sort of put in perspective for me. It takes a crisis, doesn't it, for us to realise that, you know what, something has to change in the way to produce the world that we will kind of want to live in without going too crazy.
Yeah, and just very quickly, the referendum itself?
Like, the referendum is not a question of whether or not you want to leave the euro, okay, as a currency or as a political group. Okay, it's more a question of, are you willing to submit to what the bankers want to impose on the people in the form of austerity? But it's a bit weird, Christian. It's sort of like when you break up with a girlfriend, and that's happened to me a lot, okay? She can say, listen, I want to break up with you, and then you're like, okay, I'm going to have a referendum with myself and decide whether I want to accept that. Unfortunately, the banks are in control in a sense. They're now coming and saying, this is what you have to do, and they're sort of saying, yeah, well, we don't know if we want to do that. I don't think there's much budging going to go on that way.
It's a good analogy. And finally, Nathan, tell us about an ad on Craigslist in the United States.
That's right. False flag alert. I like these ones. I like to have a look at them. They get my blood pumping. So Craigslist ad is asking for crisis actors, and remember, this comes from the government in the US, crisis actors in Houston for July 4th. Okay, so that's the date. So keep your eyes peeled, because this Craigslist ad that was posted about 17 days ago, saying that our federal government is looking for crisis actors for the July 4th through to July 6th. So they're looking for these actors for a government emergency drill between the 4th and the 6th, and actors will be responsible, get this, for portraying different emergency scenarios in a simulated government terror drill. No experience is needed, so you don't have to have already been in one of these terror drills before, and confidentiality agreements are required. So they're going to pay you $200. Pretty scary stuff, because we know that there was a drill effectively being run in places like Newtown, in places like Charleston, and it does always scare me to see that the government wants people to pretend either being shot or bombed or something.
So even if you aren't an actor who's been doing the well-worn terror emergency scenario ad circuit lately in the United States, you can still apply.
You can, and remember that the last time we saw a couple of the people interviewed, okay, in places like Newtown, etc., and the Batman shooting, the same people popped up. Oh, my son was killed. Oh, my next minute was like, oh, my brother. And that's what I think creates the fear of people to think, are these things staged?
Nathan Bray, thank you, and look forward to catching up with you again in a week's time.
Cheers, everybody.